I spent the summer of 1968 working in the Armour meatpacking plant in my hometown of Worthington, Minnesota. The plant specialized in pork products, and for 8 hours a day I stood on a quarter-mile assembly line, more properly a disassembly line, removing blood clots from the necks of dead pigs. My job title, I believe, was declatter. After slaughter, the hogs were decapitated, split down the length of the belly, pried open, eviscerated, and strung up by the hind hocks on a high conveyor belt. Then gravity took over. By the time a carcass reached my spot on the line, the fluids had almost drained out everything except for thick clots of blood in the neck and upper chest cavity. To remove the stuff, I used a kind of water gun. The machine was heavy, maybe 80 pounds, and was suspended from the ceiling by a heavy rubber cord. There was some bounce to it, an elastic up and down give, and the trick was to maneuver the gun with your whole body, not lifting with the arms, just letting the rubber cord do the work for you. At one end was a trigger, at the muzzle end was a small nozzle, and a steel roller brush. As a carcass passed by, you lean forward and swing the gun up against the clots and squeeze the trigger, all in one motion, and the brush would whirl and water would come shooting out, and you'd hear a quick splattering sound as the clots dissolved into a fine red mist. It was not pleasant work. Goggles were necessary and a rubber apron, but even so it was like standing for 8 hours a day under a lukewarm blood shower. At night I'd go home smelling of pig. It wouldn't go away. Even after a hot bath scrubbing hard, the stink was always there. Like old bacon or sausage, a dense, greasy pig stink that soaked deep into my skin and hair. Among other things I remember, it was tough getting dates that summer. I felt isolated. I spent a lot of time alone, and there was also that draft notice tucked away in my wallet. In the evenings I'd sometimes borrow my father's car and drive aimlessly around town, feeling sorry for myself, thinking about the war and the pig factory, and how my life seemed to be collapsing toward slaughter. I felt paralyzed. All around me the options seemed to be narrowing, as if were hurtling down a huge black funnel, the whole world squeezing in tight. There was no happy way out. The government had ended most graduate school deferments. The waiting lists for the National Guard and Reserves were impossibly long. My health was solid. I didn't qualify for CO status. No religious grounds. No history as a pacifist. Moreover, I could not claim to be opposed to war as a matter of general principle. There were occasions, I believed, when a nation was justified in using military force to achieve its ends, to stop a Hitler or some comparable evil, and I told myself that in such circumstances I would have willingly marched off to the battle. The problem, though, was that a draft board did not let you choose your war. Beyond all this, or at the very center, was the raw fact of terror. I did not want to die. Not ever, but certainly not then, not there, not in a wrong war. Driving up Main Street past the courthouse and then Ben Franklin's store, I sometimes felt the fear spreading inside me like weeds. I imagined myself dead. I imagined myself doing things I could not do, charging an enemy position, taking aim at another human being. At some point in mid-July, I began thinking seriously about Canada. The border lay a few hundred miles north, an 8-hour drive. But my conscience and my instincts were telling me to take a break for it. Just take off and run like hell and never stop. In the beginning, the idea seemed purely abstract, the word Canada printing itself out in my head, but after a time I could see particular shapes and images, the sorry details of my own future, a hotel room in Winnipeg, a battered old suitcase, my father's eyes as I tried to explain to myself over the telephone. I could almost hear his voice and my mother's. Run, I'd think. Then I'd think, impossible. Then a second later I'd think, run. It was a kind of schizophrenia, a moral split. I couldn't make up my mind. I feared the war, yes, but I also feared exile. I was afraid of walking away from my own life, my friends and my family, my whole history, everything that mattered to me. I feared losing the respect of my parents. I feared the law. I feared ridicule and censure. My hometown was a conservative little spot on the prairie, a place where tradition counted, and it was easy to imagine people sitting around a table down at the old Cobbler Cafe on Main Street, coffee cups poised, the conversation slowly zeroing in on the young O'Brien kid, how the damn sissy had taken off for Canada. At night when I couldn't sleep, I'd sometimes carry on fierce arguments with those people. I'd be screaming at them, telling them how much I detested their blind, thoughtless, automatic acquiescence to it all, their simple-minded patriotism, their prideful ignorance, their love it or leave it platitudes, how they were sending me off to fight a war they didn't understand and didn't want to understand. I held them responsible. By God, yes, I did. All of them. I held them personally and individually responsible. The polyester Kiwanis boys, the merchants and farmers, the pious churchgoers, the chatty housewives, the PTA and the Lions Club, and the veterans of foreign wars, and the fine upstanding gentry out at the country club. They didn't know Bay Day from the Man in the Moon. They didn't know history. They didn't know the first thing about Diem's tyranny or the nature of Vietnamese nationalism or the long colonialism of the French. This was all too damn complicated. It required some reading, but no matter, it was a war to stop the communists, plain and simple, which was how they liked things, and you were a treasonous pussy if you had second thoughts about killing or dying for plain and simple reasons. I was bitter, sure, but it was so much more than that.